I know. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the April 23 full. I'm going to ask Commissioner Cox to lead us in our invocation this morning and Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll stand.
Lord, we thank you so much for this day that you blessed us with, an opportunity to get together. We ask you to bless this agency and continue to bless this agency, this commission, that all our deliberations and decisions will be pleasing to you. We ask you to watch over us as we go home and bless our country and bless our troops wherever they may be. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you, Bill. And again, welcome. We have some special guests with us today, J.W. Worthen and Andrew Peercy with the Tennessee Wildlife Federation, the SCTP. Where are you folks? There you are. Thanks for coming. Of course, Laura and Clarence Dye are here. Tennessee Fur Harvesters Association. I should know that. I'll do better. And Tiffany Maxedon. Where are you, Tiffany? There she is. And that is Tiffany, not Stephanie. They messed with me the other night with that for hours. It was ridiculous. Molly Wilson's here. Hi, Molly. Bobby's wife. We welcome all those guests. I was listening to that great prayer about doing things that are pleasing. And I think that we really have been blessed and that we are doing some things that are really exciting and are good news for Tennessee. You know, we had a record year with license sales last year. Our license sales are up even over that this year. Last year we had we were the number one state in the United States in hunting license sales. Tennessee is truly getting out front on a lot of things. We listened yesterday to the professors from Cornell who talked to us about CWD and modeling. And although I didn't understand a lot of what they said exactly, I understand what it's all about. And I also heard them say that Tennessee is in the forefront on this issue. That's good news for Tennessee. That's where we want to be. We want to be in the forefront of everything we do, and our wildlife folks are attacking CWD with everything they've got, and we're making headway with that. A lot of other things just mentioned. You know, we're getting some new equipment for law enforcement, try to keep our waters safe. So I think it's a great day. A lot of good things going on, and I'm very proud to be part of this. You all have had, well, let's go ahead with our roll call at this point.
Tommy Woods. Here. Angie Box. Here. Monty Ballou. Stan Butt. Here. Wally Childress. Here. Bill Cox. Here. Chris Devaney. Here. Jimmy Granberry. Here. Steve Jones. Here. Brian McClellan. Here. Kent Woods. Here. Hank Wright. Here. Jim Ripley.
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Danette. Commissioners, be sure to key your mic when you speak, and our audio folks ask that you get up on the mic so that everybody can hear us. You have before you, or have been provided, a copy of the minutes for our last meeting. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve as presented.
Second.
We've got a motion from Commissioner Granberry, second from Commissioner Box. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, are there any announcements from the director?
Chairman, thank you. Just briefly though, you were bragging about our agency and how we're in the forefront. We're also pretty much in the forefront of the Asian Carp management plan too. Chief Frank Fiss has been in the middle of it. All the southeastern states, a lot of the chiefs and the other folks look up to Frank as the leader of what's going on. You know, also, the Tennessee Wildlife Federation coordinates monthly calls that I can't tell you how many people, but Frank will probably share that a little bit when he talks about Asian carp. So just want to bring that to your attention too.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm looking forward to Frank's presentation. Any announcements from commissioners? All right. Hearing none, we'll move right forward to retention and recruitment, and I'll recognize Andrew Peercy with the Tennessee Wildlife Federation.
Well, good morning. My name is J.W. Worthen. I'm the Programs Director for the Tennessee Wildlife Federation, and those programs include the Scholastic Clay Target Program. You're going to hear me call that SCTP a lot. Our organizations, we love our acronyms. Hunting and Fishing Academy, and Hunters for the Hungry. It's my pleasure to be here today and give you an update from last season, but first I wanted to show you just a little glimpse, and especially the new commissioners, of what a visual about what SCTP is all about. Before I got off into the update. So the Federation began operating this program back in 2005 with a generous grant from this commission, and has now grown into one of the largest and most successful shooting programs in the nation. We're blessed to have an agency that is such a great partner and also helps adding capacity across the state. That, along with several individual commissioners, have been instrumental in pushing this program in their local areas. Commissioner Box and McLaren both have started new teams in their hometowns that are now thriving, so thank you. If you move on to our mission with SCTP is really to introduce youth into the shooting sports and recruit them into an outdoor lifestyle for a lifetime, where these youth will hopefully self-identify as outdoors men and women. We utilize the shooting sports as an avenue to teach and mentor these youth, first on the trap fields, and then hopefully transition them into the outdoors through other avenues like our Hunting and Fishing Academy. Who can compete? Athletes ages 9 through college participate on almost 100 teams, either school, 4-H, or other locally sponsored teams across the state that compete in the main 3 shotgun sports disciplines of trap, skeet, and sporting clays. Now these athletes do represent the future of the shooting sports, as you're going to hear from a minute from a couple of our guests. The Federation guides these teams and athletes through the season that begins in September with a recruiting day, and then it ends in June with our regional and state championships. First, I want to talk about safety. Safety is always our primary focus. All of our athletes must complete hunter's education before joining the program. And then all of our coaches also receive training through one of our 2 accepted courses taught by the NRA and the Scholastic Shooting Sports Foundation. We also background check all of our volunteer coaches every year. And then Tennessee SCTP athletes learn dedication and sportsmanship, leadership, and deep-rooted personal responsibility, all while surrounding them with many layers of social support, which we know is critical, around with other athletes and coaches and their families. So now we're going to talk a little bit about last season. And if you had to ask me the 2 words that best describe last season, I think it would be persevering and opportunistic. First, let's talk about the first part of the season, or that persevering. Much like the rest of the world, the 2019-20 season for SCTP turned out to be a very interesting one. We started off and we had some big plans, and right before our peak sign-up period, COVID hit, and all of those plans pretty much went out the window. But our volunteer coaches, they were in a tough spot. Many of our school teams and 4-H teams were told by their school sponsors that they would not be able to participate. So we were in a very unique situation. While the easy way out would have been to shut down for the year like most every other sport did because of COVID, we wanted to move forward. We wanted to give everybody that wanted to participate an avenue, but also not upset our sponsors for future participation, all while trying to get these athletes out of the house and onto the field, a level playing field and a safe playing field. Another big consideration was capacity. Several of the ranges across the state were shut down, and teams couldn't practice at their normal facilities. We were also up against local and regional and state requirements and phases, which made planning a logistical nightmare. Also, early on, there wasn't a playbook or best practices to go by. By the end, we were the playbook. Organizations were calling us, asking us for advice on how to run competitions in these trying times. And with all of those factors, we were still only down 17% for the season registration. And then we had to come up with a way for these athletes to compete. So we went to work creating some new practice and competition procedures to keep our athletes and our families safe. We had to make several changes that we probably wouldn't have been able to make unless we were under these unique circumstances. Our first big change was to virtualize our regional championships. We did not want to put our volunteers across the state into a bad situation. So now teams could go to their nearest open range and send in their scores virtually, reducing travel and expenses and not putting that pressure on our volunteer coaching staff that would normally execute these regional competitions. And because of those efforts, we had over 1,600 participants at our regional championships, which were only 27% down. But I think our biggest obstacle for the state was our state championships. Those are held at the Nashville Gun Club. But we still wanted to give athletes that pinnacle event of the season. We had all the typical requirements with the mask and the screening questions, et cetera. But we also eliminated all group gatherings. Also, all award ceremonies were eliminated. And we altered the schedule to reduce the number of nights that the teams had to stay in Nashville. So we had to push the original date back so we would fall within that acceptable phase 3 for an event of this size in Nashville. But even with all those trials and tribulations, we were still able to have over 1,460 participants at the state shoot over 4 days. One day after we completed the state shoot, Nashville went back to phase 2, which probably would have prevented us from moving forward with the event. So it was really a miracle to be able to hold the state shoot in Nashville and only be down 35% with all the limitations brought on by COVID. Now we're going to look at the second half of the year, the opportunistic half. As we came out of the summer months, we started to see a pattern of people from all different backgrounds wanting to get out of the house and get outdoors. As you guys are well aware, you just heard Commissioner Ripley say we had a huge spike in license sales last year, and that was one of the few really big wins that came from this historic pandemic. It turned a 30-year decline almost overnight. But up to this point, SCTP and Hunting and Fishing Academy, we really mostly focused on recruitment strategies for adults and youth. And the agency was focusing on the other 2 R's, which are retaining and reactivating. But with this current resurgence, we also knew we needed to change our tactics. So first, we decided to appeal to potential youth and parents with a new approach. We utilized our network of certified coaches and orchestrated a statewide first shot recruiting day. Held over 17 sites across the state over 2 weekends, youth could come out and learn how to safely handle firearms and the basics to break their first moving target. In cooperation with the agency and other partners, we promoted the event, and we also promoted the new shooting facilities across the state, including Lone Oaks, Crossville, and Greene County. That event was a huge success. Just in that one event, we were able to introduce shooting sports to over 650 brand new youth and their families. We also hit on some new markets we were not previously hitting, like homeschool kids, and many of those had no idea the program even existed. Now, obviously, many of these kids did go on to join SCTP teams, but we've also seen a lot of them come join our Hunting and Fishing Academy program events, wanting to take that next step to get into the outdoors, or joining our new online virtual webinars that we teach and mentor new and returning outdoors men and women. After the huge success last season, we're currently looking to expand this first shot recruiting day this fall to keep the momentum going, and we're looking to also add segments around archery, .22 rifle, and even fishing for the sites that have that capacity. It really was helped highlight that even as successful as this program is, we still have new markets to reach and other avenues to explore. And lastly, on the opportunistic side, I wanted to add that we're already seeing a 10 to 15% increase in SCTP signups this spring, along with 8 new teams across the state. The first one I'd call out is a new one in Greene County at the new facility there, and they just signed up with 12 new athletes. We also have a new team in Hardeman County that will practice at the Lone Oak facility, and they have 35 signed up for their first year there. Now I want to introduce a couple of other bright spots from our SCTP program. Eli Chrisman and Min-May Pup both grew up shooting in SCTP, and as you will see, their paths are totally different and very unique, but both use SCTP as a vehicle to find their way to their dreams. Eli?
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, how are you guys doing today? Let me ask you a question. So, if you look back into your elementary school days, middle school days, how many of you guys could predict where you are right now? The path that you took, the sports you played, the grades you made, the classes you took in college. Did any of you think that you would end up exactly where you were? For me, I know it was not.
I had a teacher that said I'd be in prison at this point.
Not sure if I can top that one, but you know, I'll be honest, I wasn't one of those kids that grew up and knew what I wanted to do. I was a good kid, of course, but I didn't have a plan. I wasn't a football player. I wasn't, you know, a jock. I wasn't in a clique, you know. And if I look back on it, and grades were always important to me, you know, athletics were, a lot of it was pushed by my parents. And thinking back to the very average suburban life that I grew up, little did I ever know I would be going on a college scholarship to shoot. Of all things, that was not even a thought in my mind when I was that age. So yeah, it all started when I was in high school. I wish I had started earlier, looking back on it now, some 7.5 years later, but my freshman year in high school was the first time I ever heard of clay target shooting, the SCTP, anything of the sort. I was in ROTC, I was in band, I did a bunch of stuff because I didn't really know what I was doing, you know. I liked it, I did okay, but I hadn't really found my passion yet. And after a lot of trial and error, a lot of ups, a lot of downs, Dad and I just kind of took it in stride. I got very lucky to have a father and mother, of course, that support me and supported all my passions, but supported this. And, you know, I made a choice, and the SCTP is where it all started for me. We had a club sport at Saudi Daisy High School, and I just started going to practices 2 times a week, and it took me about a year or so to really get into it. And I started to meet people, started to meet the friends, people I still call close friends today. And without those people, without those experiences, I wouldn't be where I am. That kind of bred my experience throughout high school. If I had played basketball, JV, something else, you know, I would have gone to college, but I probably would have just stayed at home. I wouldn't have had the experiences I had. And, you know, I just fell in love with it. There's something about it. We had about 10 people on my high school team, so we weren't very big. And I live in Chattanooga, for those of you who don't know. So we're not, Region 3 is a decent-sized region, but going into the state is where I kind of had my first experience. And that first year, I was like, man, I want to see where this can take me. I really want to run with this. I really want to go. I want to see what all there is to offer. And SCTP, to me, is one of those programs that I started off in, and up to about a month and a half ago, I still am competing in. I plan to keep competing as a collegiate student. But I would say that it's a wonderful entrance program, but it's also a program to grow through for life, as there's so many people, Min-May, Dylan Owens, so many people, these fine gentlemen I've met in my time here. And you know, it's taken me so many places. Shortly after that, I made it on the national junior team. I've been on the national junior team twice for USA Shooting. I've made it around the world a couple times on the Team USA's behalf, on which I'll ever be grateful for. And, you know, I have the SCTP to thank for that. I started here, and a lot of kids started in 4-H, a lot of kids started in CMP, and SCTP is what I found, and without this program, I wouldn't be where I am today. So, and I'm currently sitting 8th to go to the Olympics in 2021, as it sits. I won't go, unfortunately, but keep my head up. 2024 is coming, so. Is there anything I can answer?
And he is being very modest. He's like one of the top 4 international skeet shooters in the country right now. So, Min-Mai?
Hello, my name is Min-Mai Pup. I've been a part of the SC program for about 9 years now. The SC program is such a wonderful program and has helped me grow so much and become the person who I am today. I was always familiar with firearms, and at a young age my father had showed me proper gun safety, but I learned about the clay target shooting sport from a friend in middle school, and at the time I'd never heard of clay target shooting. And when I told my dad about it, he was very interested, and he was like, well, why not? It has guns involved, let's do it. So the next day I went to sign up. Sadly, the spots were all filled up, so I had to wait till the next year to join. I began my shooting career in 6th grade, and as many know my story, I was not gifted the talent to shoot at all. I couldn't hit a target to save my life. No matter how many times I tried, I just couldn't. And my scores weren't all that great. And one day after practice, my mom came up to me and told me, you know what? Maybe this isn't your sport. Maybe we should just stick to Taekwondo. It's just not for you. But I didn't want to give up because I had fell in love with the sport already, and I'd made so many friends through it, and I just didn't want to. So me and her made a deal. She said that if I won a national title, we could get me a new gun, and I could keep shooting. Well, I won a national title in sporting clays, and I got a new gun, and I got to keep shooting. And not long after that, my career started to skyrocket. I started to get private coaching. I had gotten another new gun, and I started winning state titles, regional titles, national titles, left and right. I had received a scholarship to shoot at Bethel University for college, and my scores had improved greatly too, and it's all thanks to the ST program and them teaching me to never give up and how to be confident and sportsmanship and how to deal with failure, and it's really made me the person who I am today. My parents have been a big role in my shooting career as well, and I wouldn't be here without their support for taking countless of vacations, sick days to take me to competition, and I think we hadn't had a vacation in probably 3 years. So our vacation is when we get to go to competitions out of state. But at a young age, I had always loved the outdoors. I was always outside, whether it be playing in the dirt or playing with bugs, or I just loved the outdoors. Never wanted to be inside. And through the clay target shooting program and SCTP, it really pushed what I wanted to do as a major in college, because I didn't really know what I wanted to do as a major. Both of my parents are engineers, and they wanted me to be an engineer. I was like, I didn't want to be that. I was like, why don't I work in conservation? I want to pursue that. I want to be out in the outdoors with wildlife, with young people, just doing that. And so that really helped me pursue what I wanted to do as a major, which I'm an environmental science major right now. And I am very thankful for the program for that, and I hope that I can be a part of the wildlife conservation and to help make a difference in the environment and just help out with that. But I am very grateful for this program. I wouldn't be here where I am without them, and it's done not only a great job for me, but as well as the other young athletes right now, and I'm very grateful for them. So, thank you.
So I think you can see why these are two great role models for the program, and we appreciate them coming out today. I also wanted to thank my team that helps manage this program, Andrew Peercy, who is the program's manager, and Dylan Barnes is also an audience. Raise your hand, Dylan. He's actually another student that came through the program and shot an SCTP, shot on a college scholarship in Bethel, and now he's working for us, so he's come full circle. So it's great to have a good team behind us, and I'll open it up now if there's any questions or any comments from the commission.
Thank you so much. First of all, congratulations to these young people. Shooting stars, which is not a pun, but it sort of is. Yes, you are. And are your parents, Meme, are these your parents here? Okay. This lady was she was videoing you the whole time. I thought that might be your mom, but okay. Well, thank you for coming, and thank you to the Federation for everything you're doing. This is a great program. Sportsmen and women literally support the resources of this state, and by getting kids involved at an early age in these programs, we're making future sportsmen and women, and it's a fantastic thing. I want to thank Commissioner Box and Commissioner McLaren for their efforts in this regard. Either of y'all have anything you'd like to say?
First off, I'd like to say that these two athletes they brought before us today are exemplary of our sport. I've been able to watch them grow and compete and seen the challenges they faced, and they are both excellent competitors. And I assure you that they have both downplayed their abilities today. If anybody would like to go shoot with them, I guarantee you will be humbled.
I told Minmay she looked so nice today in her attire, but on the field, she is a different person. I promise you.
So also as a coach, I would just like to say I'm a prime example. You do not have to be a good shot to be a coach. So if any of you are interested in being a coach, these guys can hook you up and get you on the right path. It has really helped myself and a lot of the athletes in our community to be able to have a sport that they can do, because not everybody's going to be a football player or a softball player. So it's for an avenue that's out there that a lot of people don't realize. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Angie?
Thank y'all for being here. You always have the best speakers. You bring them. I'm just like, we all got to go shoot right now. It's awesome. But thank y'all and congratulations. I love hearing these stories. It's wonderful. And our team did start new during the COVID season, and we persevered and made it through. And we've got several new athletes this year. And to see these kids, this one little girl, she got here and she was holding the gun upside down the first practice, and she didn't know. She had hunter safety, of course, but that was it. And to see her now, I get teary-eyed just watching her. She's so excited and excelling, doing well. And my son's a great example too. He gun safety and a duck blind, and just how his self-confidence has been great. It's amazing. So it's a wonderful program. If any of you can get kids involved, it's awesome. So thank y'all so much for everything you do. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much. Anything we can do to help, please let us know. I see Mike Butler came in. He's the CEO of this fine organization, the Federation. And let us know how we as an agency and commission can help further your efforts, please. Thank you. All right. Are there any questions from commissioners? Yes. Commissioner Granberry.
I might have missed it in the where do y'all go to school?
I go to Martin Methodist College.
Great. Okay. Okay. And does anybody have an update? A couple of pre-COVID, we had a young lady from Martin that was at our meeting, and one of the Martin students was on the Olympic team. Is there an update on that, just out of curiosity?
Do you know what Emma's doing right now? So Emma Williams, yeah, she's a good friend of mine. So she actually just got into chiropractor school at Logan University in St. Louis.
Okay.
So she'll be graduating this spring.
Is she going to Tokyo?
No,
She's not.
Well, we're both alternates. Back.
Well, thank you so much. Congratulations.
Keep the dream alive for 2024.
Commissioner Cox.
Are there other universities, I know Bethel's and Martin Methodist, but are you promoting or trying to get other universities for
There are, and there's a few
scholarship
more
programs?
coming on board. Lindenwood, they give a lot of scholarships. There's about 5 or 6 that give main scholarships up to half, most of it. But after that, they're considered a club sport. And like Clemson, your bigger universities, University of Tennessee, they have programs, but they don't give scholarships. They're going to pay for shells and they're going to pay for practice, but they don't have full ride scholarships yet.
I sure wish somebody on the commission knew somebody at University of Tennessee that might move this up to a scholarship board.
Since Martin is merging with Tennessee.
Yes, since Martin's merging with Tennessee, they might step that up.
That'd be a great topic.
Y'all know anybody down there, maybe?
Might be the only way.
Let's work on that. Other comments or questions? Comments from the public or the agency? All right, seeing none, well, we appreciate you
Thank y'all.
very much. Thank you for being here. At this time, I'd like Joe Benedict to give us a brief recap of what we talked about in Proclamation 2102, the migratory game bird hunting seasons for 21-22.
Well, good morning, Commissioners. I promise this will not be as long as my team took yesterday. Thank you for your patience as we went through chronic wasting disease. Wanted to just share briefly at the Chairman's request what we shared yesterday with the Commission and the public regarding the migratory game bird hunting season and regulations. This will be for this fall. We're seeking final approval. We went through this yesterday in detail with the Wildlife Committee. Today, what I wanted to do is just, Terry, could you go to the very last slide? Just as a way of a recap, and we could certainly answer questions that anyone in the Commission has. As you recall, the federal frameworks are what provide the outside limits for our seasons. All the changes that we recommended are within those frameworks. Really, most of the changes, all the slides that we showed yesterday were calendar date changes to account for the seasons for this fall compared to last year. We did modify the crow season. This is adding some days in what is phase 2 now to allow for crow hunting during the opening day of dove season and a few extra days around that season. We also added some additional language to veteran and active military waterfowl hunt days to align with our youth days. And just a reminder to the Commission and the public that all the sandhill crane tags will continue to be issued by computer drawing.
(21-02). Do I hear any motion?
Mr. Chairman, the Wildlife Committee met yesterday and voted unanimously to approve this as presented, and we bring forth to the full Commission Proclamation 2102, Migratory Game Bird Hunting Season Regulations for approval by the full Commission.
Thank you, Commissioner Granberry. Is there a second? Who was that? Okay, Stan. All right. Is there any discussion? Any discussion on this? All right.
Joe, could you explain to the committee the federal framework relative to the veterans and youth that we're adhering to the limits based on that?
Sure. So for a long time, we've had 2 additional days beyond the regular duck season, which has been 60 days for 20 plus years. For youth season, we're allowed 2 extra days outside of those frameworks. They have to occur within 14 days, either from the beginning of the season for those northern states or at the end of the season, after the end of the season, typically for southern states. Those days can be concurrent, Saturday, Sunday. They have to be, or not. They could be Saturday like we do. They have to be on non-school days. So you couldn't have them on a Monday or Tuesday. That's not a holiday. The veteran and active military days are the same. It's 2 additional days, again, beyond the 60 days that we have. They have to be within 14 days of the start of the season or at the end. And they could be consecutive or non-consecutive.
Thank you, Joe.
All right, any other questions from
I've got a
Commissioner?
follow-up on that. So to be clear, the question and I had asked you yesterday, you've got a Saturday, Sunday. So would the framework allow veterans and youth to hunt together for 2 weekends instead of separating the days?
No, sir. The youth hunts are allowed 2 extra days, and the veterans are allowed 2 extra days. They can be on top of each other. In other words, we could have a youth day and a veterans day the same day, but you're only allowed 2 days for youth hunters and 2 days for veterans and active military.
Okay, so you'd have to leave off Sunday or Saturday, one or the other. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of passage of Proclamation 2102 regarding the migratory game bird hunting seasons 2021 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there anyone opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. And at this point, I want to call Frank Fiss, our Fisheries Chief. And Frank, I didn't mention this to you earlier when we spoke this morning, but just very, very briefly, for benefit of new commissioners and those folks around the state that don't understand why we are so concerned about Asian carp, can you explain the harm that they can do in our reservoirs and in the various bodies of water of the state? How is it that they cause the problems that they cause?
Well, the main issue with the carp is that they can get very abundant, and when they are abundant, they have the potential to impact the whole food web, so to speak. They're eating the primary productivity in the system, and it leaves less food for the other fish, and they can push fish out of the way. Essentially, they're using up space. One of the impacts is to fishermen if they're in a cove, if they want to fish where they may have crappie structures out, and these carp are in there in mass, they're not going to want to fish there. So they're impacting fishermen. We've been very fortunate in that we've not seen just complete failure of our native stocks. They're still holding on pretty well. But we are also active, as you'll see, actively removing carp and taking steps so that they don't get overwhelm our native fish. The other issue with these carp is that the silver carp jump, and when they do, these large fish, if they hit you while you're boating, even at no speed or at any speed at all, people are injured and they will damage equipment in the boat as well. So it's a national problem, and the agency, as the director mentioned earlier, we are part of a multi-agency team responding to this, and we've been trying to lead as best we can in the Tennessee Valley on that. So, and I'll get into more of that in the presentation.
They get to be pretty large fish as well.
They do. The big head carp, the world record big head carp is 90 pounds caught out of Nickajack, and but at this time, outside of the Mississippi River, our main issue is the silver carp, and those fish get, typically, we're seeing a big one is 15, 20 pounds. They can get bigger, but that's what we generally see in the Tennessee Cumberland systems.
All right, thank you.
And I'll get more into that in the presentation, but before I get started on this, I did want to give just a fisheries update, if you will, where we're at. You know, it's springtime. Hopefully everyone's out fishing today or every chance you get, but our fisheries crews are really busy this time of year. They're shifting into their reservoir sampling. We sample reservoirs and streams every year of our prominent fisheries, so we understand what's happening there. We are in our year of fishing regulations, and we just completed our public comment period earlier this week, so I want to thank all the people that did write in and share their opinions with us. And that process will be ongoing until we bring this commission proposals in August of this year. And our hatcheries are quite busy this time of year too. They're stocking at their highest rate on the tailwaters and trout streams, and our warm water hatcheries are trying to get the brood fish to, bringing brood fish into the hatchery and incubating those eggs and getting them outside for production. So it's a very busy time of year for our staff. But let me start into the, I want to give an overview of the Asian carp issue. We've already talked about it a little bit, but I know we've got new commissioners here, and so I want to take a little deeper dive than maybe I normally do. You know, Asian carp, also lately we're calling those invasive carp. You're going to see that language more. Refer to 4 species of fish that were brought to the states for various purposes in aquaculture and water treatment. And of course, they were kept in ponds outside, and those ponds were captured by overflowing rivers, and they were released into the Mississippi River system, where they're out at large now. And all 4 of these species are reproducing in the Mississippi River system. And of course, we have the Mississippi River in West Tennessee, and we have our tributaries are connected to the Mississippi River. So that's how they're coming to Tennessee. The black carp on the bottom there is an issue for us because its diet is mussels, and we have among the best diversity of mussels on the planet, and most of them are imperiled. So we are very concerned about what an abundant population of black carp would do to our Tennessee Cumberland River system, especially. Fortunately, these at this time seem to be a big river fish. We've only had just a few occurrences of black carp in the Tennessee Cumberland system, so we are not actively, we don't have any programs that are targeting them exactly, but all of our strategies that you'll hear about in a bit will affect all these fish over time. The grass carp is another one that you're probably familiar with. They've been used for pond management for 50 years more, and those fish have been at large in Tennessee for a long time, and not that they can't become a bigger problem, but to date they haven't been as big a problem as silver carp have become in just a decade. So what you're going to find is that our focus as a matter of triage is to focus on silver and bighead carp. These are the 2 species that are in the Mississippi River, and they're in the Tennessee Cumberland rivers, and they're the ones that we're putting all of our effort into. The silver carp on top is the one that jumps and will hurt you if it hits you. And they're by far the most abundant in our Tennessee Cumberland systems right now. So we already mentioned the impacts. We're worried about them outcompeting natives. They jump, and there's certainly economic impacts due to declines in recreation. We've seen people decide not to go to lakes just because the carp are there, whether the fishing is good or not, and we don't like to see that. So here's the distribution of carp. It may be tough in this room, but the Mississippi River is on the left there, that bright red line. Those fish are actively reproducing. We expect them to be successful at spawning every year in that system, and that is the source of all carp. Well, I won't say all carp, but most of the carp that we are seeing in the Tennessee Cumberland systems are coming in through those locks at the Kentucky and Barkley dams that are opened and closed about 6,000 times a year. So when you get into Tennessee Cumberland systems, that more orange-looking area, we have abundant silver carp and some bighead carp in those systems. And then as you go upstream, you're seeing fewer carp in, say, Cheatham and Pickwick reservoirs. And then after that, upstream, fortunately, in Old Hickory, Cordell Hole, and Wilson, Wheeler, and on upstream in the East Tennessee, we've only had individual reports of fish. We've not seen, interestingly enough, like for example on Gunnersville, which is a very popular, heavily used water body in Alabama, they've yet to see a silver carp in that system. So we've reason to believe that numbers of fish upstream of Wilson are extremely low, and we're hoping to keep it that way through the strategies that we've got employed. Our goals are to stop the movement of these fish from getting in abundant situations upstream, preferably have them never get further upstream. But we also need to reduce their abundance in places where they are. The fewer carp there are in an area, the less likely they are to cause damage to the ecosystem or the economy. So we've got 4 strategies that we're employing right now nationally, and just to run through them quick: prohibit movement by people, we're removing carp, we're figuring out how to put barriers at the locks to keep them from moving upstream, and we're monitoring the carp to understand everything we can about how they use locks and whether or not our control strategies are working. So I'll start with prohibited movement by people. This commission has already enacted all appropriate proclamations, and we already have some state law that makes it illegal to move, to even possess a live Asian carp. So we feel like this step of the strategies is complete. We are reminding the public about this every year in our fishing guides and other opportunities. Should we see a drastic change in the where we are seeing small Asian carp, we may be coming back to this commission to amend those proclamations. But for now, I think we're still in good shape where this commission set it up a few years ago. A big effort that we have is the strategic removal of carp. We want to remove fish from the lower Tennessee and Cumberland rivers. So that's Kentucky and Barkley lakes where fish are abundant, and luckily we already have commercial fishers that work these waters. The goal of removing fish from strategically, we're not paying people to take fish from the Mississippi River where we know they're reproducing every year. We want to take fish from the Barkley and Kentucky lakes because we're not seeing steady reproduction there. We know they can be overfished. So having these fish removed from these waters reduces the impacts in that location, but more importantly, it reduces the likelihood of those same fish moving upstream. And that's an important part of our control of upstream movement, is to remove them from where they're at. So how have we been doing that? We have an Asian Carp Harvest Incentive Program. Through this last funding year for the HIP program, TWRA has put in $600,000 and TVA $50,000 for incentives to give to commercial fishers and the buyers collectively. We were giving them 10 cents a pound for every pound that was removed. Now we're at 13 cents a pound and have been for the last contract cycle. The good news is that effective now and even a few months ago, we were allowed to use U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service grants to fund that program. So while the first 2 years we had less than $700,000 in it, we have $794,000 available for this current grant cycle to spend on removing fish. And next year we already have that in the pipeline from the service to have $842,000. So that will allow us to remove about 6.5 million pounds of carp through that program at no cost to the agency. We also provided grants to the counties in Benton and Henry County, essentially. We did this in 2018. We had a small grant that we went to Henry County, and we have a contract in place now with both counties that total $400,000. Now, these funds are used to allow the buyers to build out their facilities so they can handle more fish. A lot of the markets that they are trying to court that want to be able to buy more fish at one time, so they need to have more space to hold carp, and they can't have people fishing unless they have space to put the fish. So by Tennessee Wildlife providing these funds, we've already seen the benefits of this. They've built out. This is an example at North American Caviar. They were able to resurface their driveways so that they could handle 18-wheelers coming in and out. And they've built, this is just one of a few different freezer annexes that they've built to be able to hold more fish. And this is, right now, the main product that they're moving is bait. So they're cutting bait into little chunks, putting them in boxes and freezing them. And this bait is going to the lobster fishery on the northeast United States. And there's even some, I guess, shrimp, or not shrimp, lobster or crab in the Gulf. But primarily it's that main lobster fishery. So here's what's been removed through the HIP program since we started in September of 2018. So you can see that you know, our best year, our best months of the year, we were doing maybe 500,000 pounds of fish. Now, since those freezers have been put in place and they were able to court these other markets, they kind of released the fishermen to go get more fish. And in March, they harvested over 900,000 pounds out of Kentucky and Barkley Lakes. So that to me, that demonstrates that we did need to give them more capacity to allow them to court more people to buy fish. So we're at about 7 million pounds as a program. Keep in mind that the state of Kentucky has similar programs, and they're at least at about 12 million pounds have come out of the same water bodies. So we're really hammering these two water bodies strategically with our partners to keep those numbers in check. And there are there are probably other things that we should be doing to improve that business even more. And as part of the Tennessee Asian Carp Advisory Commission, which Commissioner Blue serves on and I serve on, and Mike Butler with the Federation here, that commission is also trying to answer this question, and they've recently set up a business development committee to look into this question. So this is an area of interest. Not just Tennessee is doing. All the states in the Southeast are figuring out how to get this going, and they're looking to Tennessee for advice on some of this contract fishing work. So we also need, in addition to removing fish where they are to keep their numbers down and to keep them from moving upstream, we now are starting to learn about technologies that will keep fish from moving upstream through the locks. And we are dedicated to that effort. So we have hundreds, between the 4 states involved, we have hundreds and hundreds of fish tagged with sonic tags. These are carp that have been tagged, and some native fish too, to see how they're reacting to locks. So the fish are at large, and then we have these passive receivers, which is that larger black unit there. It's about the size of a 2-liter bottle. That's positioned out in the river so that we can detect fish coming by. We're doing all this so we can learn everything about how and when carp use locks. You know, do they always come through with a commercial vessel, or will they go through with a recreational vessel? That's the difference in some places. What times of year do they do it? Does it matter if there's a downstream barge and an upstream barge in sequence? We're trying to learn all of that so we can be effective in deterring these fish. So here is a really small map, of all the places where we have our monitoring efforts going on, our passive receivers. So just in summary, we have receivers basically from the Ohio River all the way up through Old Hickory Reservoir and all the way up through Gunnersville Reservoir. So we would know if our tagged fish were moving upstream through those locks. And a little bit of what we've seen so far is obviously, and we've confirmed that carp are using the locks. They use them more frequently in the summer. And we see fish moving upstream and downstream. A lot of the fish that were tagged in Pickwick Reservoir actually went downstream, not upstream. And we've not seen any fish move upstream past Wilson or Old Hickory of our tagged fish. So this kind of gets back to that understanding of how fish are moving. It is not a mass stampede of fish that need to go upstream. It is a lot of fish in one area, and when they get abundant, they're spilling over to the next upstream reservoir. So we really believe, based on seeing these fish coming and going upstream and then back downstream, that there is no real drive for them to go up. So we think if we keep the numbers low enough in these lower reservoirs, we have a shot at keeping them there and hopefully getting their numbers way down further if we can get our barriers in to keep fish from coming up from the Ohio River and keeping them from going further upstream. We get them kind of pinched off, and then we fish them down in between. That's what we're trying to do. So to get barriers in place, these are 4 steps that are what I would call recent progress on this. First of all, we have an experimental barrier at Barkley Lock. And that was installed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and USGS. Of course, the state of Kentucky is hosting that. And this is the first time that this kind of application has been put on a working navigation lock anywhere. So we were excited to see this put in place. This is what it looks like. They have sounds, lights, and bubbles underwater in this housing that then they drop that underwater, and it's protected by that concrete so ships can still pass through. And then fish are deflected by the sound, lights, and bubbles. And this is what it looks like in operation. You know, the fish hear and see that, and they don't want to go through that, is the hope. Now, we're measuring the efficiency of this by watching closely the behavior of these tagged fish that are at large in the system. But this is an important first step. Every one of the deterrent structures that we intend to install are going to be experiments, because it's going to be adaptive management all the way through. So the second important thing that's happened recently is that the TVA initiated a programmatic environmental assessment, which is kind of a boring thing in a lot of ways for reading material, but it was really great that TVA led to start this important first step. And when they announced that they were doing that, we knew that we were on our way to potentially getting deterrence in the Tennessee system. They're going to complete this document. Well, they're going to have this document available for review on June 30th of this year, and for 30 days, and then there'll be completion steps that follow that public comment. In anticipation of this TVA programmatic assessment, the Ohio River Asian Carp Partnership, like I said, that's all the states, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Kentucky, and Fish and Wildlife Service, USGS, the universities all got together to talk about what we needed to do to get everyone understanding the problem, what tools are available to fix the problem, and what our recommendations are. We started that in May of 2020. We couldn't do it in person, obviously. It was a lot of Zoom calls. But we started out by cross-training everyone on what we knew about our area of expertise in the problem, and including the TVA programmatic assessment team, so they understood what was available. And then after everyone knew we shared the information, we set out to answer the question of where should we put barriers. And we used an external modeling team from the USGS to kind of facilitate that process. And the results, well, not results, but I just want to mention that we did consider a variety of barrier types. We considered how the carp would respond in a variety of situations, like do the barriers work really well or not, or the carp prone to move or not, are they reproducing at different points in the reservoir or not. We don't know the answers to every one of these, but we were able to model it at high and low levels, and in all scenarios we felt there was a really good benefit to having these bath-like barriers of the light, sound, and bubbles at Wilson, Kentucky, Pickwick, and Gunnersville. Those were our recommendations given where the fish are now and the technology that we have now. We also think it would be useful to add a CO2 barrier at Kentucky and Gunnersville. This would be like a redundant system, so that we'd have even more protection at those two locations, the most downstream spot and the most upstream spot where we would want to invest our funds. So a little bit about the CO2 system. This is how, if you imagine a lock chamber, it's just a big rectangle of water. When the lock, as the ship is approaching, you would release enough CO2 in the water to get it up to the concentration we know will make fish leave, because they hate that. They want to get out of there. Once it's in a condition where they don't want to be there, we leave it on and the boat can move in, leave it on a little, and then close the gate. And then the additional water's pumped in without fish in it, and then that boat can move up upstream and get released, and that that CO2 immediately dissipates in dilution, and it's not going to hurt anything else. So it's pretty expensive. You know, all these deterrents are expensive, but this one has a consumptive use of CO2. It's about $500. The way I estimated it, it was about $500 per cycle to run one of these, a one-time event. But that is on the table still in consideration. That's been done in theory and in practice, but not at a working lock yet. So just to review what that workshop's recommendations were, we would put barriers at Wilson first, then Kentucky, Pickwick, then Guntersville, and we would do redundant barriers at Guntersville and Kentucky. Now, I'm not mentioning anything about the Cumberland River system, and that's by design. The TVA team was on a really tight deadline to get done what they were doing, and they wanted us to focus only on the Tennessee River, so that's where we're at now. Once we provide those comments, we'll switch over and figure out what we want to do on the Cumberland River next. So that leads us to the next recent development is the Water Resources Development Act is federal legislation that was recently amended, and it authorizes the Corps to use $25 million for Carp projects. So we're eyeing that money as potential to start some experimental deterrent work in the Tennessee Cumberland River. And fortunately, the authorizing language specifically says that we should be working in the Tennessee Cumberland watersheds, and the Corps should have up to 10 projects completed by September 2024 with that $25 million. However, while it's authorized, it has not been appropriated, and we are working with our partners and the Federation to get that appropriation language in the whatever budget will surface out of Congress this year. So that's a stumbling block right now. All of these deterrents are expensive. We're probably gonna need federal help to get them done. So we're happy to see that this authorizing language was put in there at least. Okay, so the fourth thing that I said we were doing as a strategy is to monitor and do research on carp. And you know, we want to get the fish out of the river. We want to stop them from moving. And some people will be like, well, why are we monitoring it? You know, we know they're there. Well, we don't know. We want to know everything about these fish, because if we're spending tens of millions of dollars on deterrent structures, we want to be able to say that we have changed the carp populations. And we can't do that until we can consistently measure the relative abundance of these fish in every one of these settings. So we're looking at the presence of adults. We want to know if young fish appear. In a typical year on a typical reservoir in Tennessee, there are no young fish because they're swimming in as like yearling fish, if you will. We're not seeing any reproduction since 2015. We haven't seen a small Asian carp in the Tennessee Cumberland River systems. When that year we did. So we also want to know how they're growing and surviving. You know, are we removing enough fish? We've got serious questions to ask. If we're removing 6.5 million pounds a year, is there maybe 4 million pounds enough, and we shouldn't be paying for 6.5, or maybe we need to be removing 10 million. We need to start answering those questions. We need to know about the fish populations to do that. And as I mentioned, there's going to be, when barriers get put on locks, our teams are going to have to be out there monitoring how carp and native fish interact with those barriers. And we're also watching how other species are affected. You know, we are still continuing our sport fish evaluations on places like Kentucky Lake that have been affected by carp. We're pretty fortunate, as I mentioned earlier, that we're not seeing any really low abundance of sport fish in a way that we've never seen it before. We've had worse times on our reservoirs than we've had right now. We'd like all the carp out, but we don't always point to the carp as being the problem, because there's reasons why they may not be as well. It could be that we just have so much incoming flow of productivity from upper reservoirs that it's going to take a lot more carp for them to impact our reservoirs. They're not static systems. So just a little update on our monitoring research. Where does that money come from? It's primarily funded by the Fish and Wildlife Service. We've done very well applying for and getting somewhat competitive grants. And this year we have $950,000 that we have to use for that. This is, we're keeping some of that money for our, well, we're sending some of that money to Tennessee Tech to do research. They're able to hire staff a little faster than we are, and they're answering some research questions that we can't answer. And then we're keeping some money in-house as well, and we were able to add new positions, and we're buying some boats, some new specialized gear to help us measure carp abundance. So we have added 5 new positions. Now, you've heard from Cole Hardy before. He's in the audience here. He's our aquatic nuisance species coordinator. He's been with us a year, and we've added 4 other positions. We've added 2 manager ones, one in Region 3, Kristen and Brandon in Region 1, although we're probably going to move him. He wants to move into another slot, so we're going to be hiring another manager one there, but that's great that we have those positions filled. And we have 2 technicians that are working solely on Asian carp. So by having these people on board, in addition to the reservoir staff that were already working a lot on carp, we've been able to I asked Cole to give me a list of some of the things they've done since they've been on board just a few months, and they've participated in the tagging of over 200 carp for different research projects with Tennessee Tech and USGS. They've expanded their reach of their larval fish sampling, where we look for juvenile fish and young fish. We've done our standard gill net setting. They've also been able to increase the surveillance on the East Tennessee reservoirs because we have additional staff in Region 3. And they're also helping prepare for some outreach materials and such. But it's been really helpful to have them, and we put them to work right away. So far, all of their salaries have been coming out of federal funding. So we're doing really well on that front. We're just going to need the much heavier lift to get the funding we need for the deterrence, which is going to be in the tens of millions over time. With that, I hope I didn't run too long on you, but there's lots of questions and areas that you might have questions about. I'd be happy to answer anything if I can.
Thank you, Frank. Are there any questions from the commission? Mr. Cox.
Frank, I probably know the answer to this, and I know the priorities, the big reservoirs, but the Wolf, the Hatchie, Loosahatchee, O'Bine, North, the Forkadere, those are just kind of on their own. I mean, there's not much you can do.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I do kind of overlook the Mississippi River whenever I give this presentation, because we're so focused on where we think we need to work now. But the Mississippi River is actively reproducing and successful every year, so it would be very hard to control the population when they're connected to that river. But I overlooked reelfoot in this presentation, and we know that some fish move up into that really valuable resource. And we have a little bit of funding this year to start addressing that, and we'll talk about that at a later date, but we're going to hopefully do some contract fishing there to get some fish out and see what's in there, and then see if we need to do more of that, or do we need to think about barriers there. There have been some work done on oxbows in Mississippi. Unfortunately, most of that work just documents how big a problem carp are in those systems, because unlike the Tennessee River, where we have some recharge from upstream and it's just a bigger water body, when they get in these little oxbow lakes, they really can just eliminate all the other desirable species. You just push them out. So it would be hard to prioritize some of those oxbows over a place like Reelfoot or Kentucky Lake at this time.
This has been going on for some time. What do you see as a timeline dealing with federal government, and you've been testing the barriers, or I guess you've got it up and going testing. Where does this, where are we going to have barriers in place and stopping these fish, and what's the timeline?
I would say conservatively, the barrier experiment at Barkley is a 3-year project, but we're not going to wait for 3 years to start the next one. The next one can be its own independent experiment as far as I'm concerned, but we will expect to get information out of the BAF system at Barkley probably towards the end of this calendar year. And that, if it's terrible, then obviously we won't want to put more of them in, but what I'm hearing is that there's no negative news coming out of that, and I want to experiment with a new one. So what will happen is we have this EA done, and if it finds no significant impact as they're finding in the EA, it'll be that much quicker for TVA to take whatever money is available. It just depends when that money comes. If we have a continuing resolution this year in Congress and there's no new monies put in, then we got to wait another year unless the money comes from somewhere else. And then it's going to take a year or so, I guess, to design it. And somebody's got to put it in. And then, so I think we're looking at three years before something's on the ground.
So the goal is ultimately to block the fish at Kentucky and Barkley and Wilson or Wheeler or somewhere and capture them in Kentucky and Barkley and then fish them out. Or try
yes, in the simplest terms, yeah. And the other thing is that the more we fish out in between the barriers, the less likely any of them are even trying to use the barriers to go upstream, because they're not going to be 100% effective barriers. That would be great if they were, but we're not spending or planning for that kind of success. None of them have been to date. So it's a game of numbers if we can get the numbers down. But that timeline, I was thinking, if TVA hadn't announced that they were going to do this PEA, I would have just said I don't know, because I didn't know what next steps had to happen. But TVA has already been talking to the Corps of Engineers, starting to develop memorandums of agreement for how they would work together if TVA needed to come work on one of their locks and vice versa. Because of course the Corps will have to be involved in anything that happens on a TVA lock, because they have authority over the navigation, even though it's the TVA-owned property. So the when is a really tough thing to answer. That I guess the positive news I'm sharing is that all the steps that need to happen are happening, at least. That we could have none of this happening. So anyway, any other questions?
Anyone else? Frank, just one quick thing. To what extent are these fish being sold for human consumption? I know they're being sold for bait. Seems to me the best way to fish out a species is to get people eating it.
Yeah, if the bait, the value of it as bait is much lower than it would be as for people food, so to speak. And I would really like to see that business development committee figure out. I mean, there's a huge demand for fish product in institutional foods and other foods, for that matter. At one time, you could buy silver carp in the grocery store in Paris. I mean, it is good eating. Is a good eating fish. It's just a matter. It's a bigger investment to get the machinery in place to process this fish and to build that market. And some of that grant money that has been allocated to Henry County is going to a machine that will prepare fish cake kind of product. And I really hope, my hope for this whole incentive program is that we could get it to where there were value added to this product locally in Tennessee, to where we wouldn't have to provide an incentive and they would still make a lot of money on these fish and get going and get them out there.
Commissioner Budd.
Are we aware of any of the $55 million that was acquired by the state that went to agriculture and business, of that money going towards any of the equipment to process from a food standpoint, value-added product?
I'm not aware of any other funding sources that have gone to them. I know that the local, that Paris-Henry County Industrial Committee has a revolving loan that they use some of. I don't know if they got that from that source, but I'm not aware of anyone using that.
Is anyone from the agency coordinating with the department towards that effort? It may be too late because they had a deadline for application, but I think some money is still left over, and Assistant Commissioner Harrison with the department is looking at reappropriating some of that money.
Well, I'd be interested to know. We've had a lot of departments involved in various discussions on this, and well, we've had university agriculture people there.
They can get up to $250,000 for equipment for what's considered enhancement towards value-added products. That would be interesting if we could pursue some of that to see.
Yeah, well, even if, this stuff was growing every day, if we could even get it in the next round of it, if we're too late right now. So, thank you.
Other questions? I don't see any. Any comments from the public? All right. Commissioner McLaren is whining about needing a break, so we're going to take a 10-minute break. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll resume by calling Pandy Upchurch with regard to a budget expansion item. Pandy?
Thank you very much, Commissioners. The Environmental Services Division is requesting a budget expansion of $135,900 for budget 7741. That is the Tallahassee Fund. We have already received the check from the Brookfield Smoky Mountain Hydropower LLC for that $135,000 and $135,900. And the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency works as a fiduciary for the Tallahassee Fund. And that budget 7741 is the Tallahassee Fund. This grant will go to the Nature Conservancy and the Conservation Fund to do the due diligence for the real estate to acquire the 3,200 acre turkey pen tract. The turkey pen tract, as you can see, is the yellow on this map. It is near the foothills, WMA. It's near the South Cherokee National Forest. And this 3,200 acres is filling the gap of public land in that area. So we request that budget expansion of $135,900 to go into budget 7741 to give a grant to these folks to purchase the turkey pen tract.
And this is at no cost to the TWRA.
Pardon?
What is the cost to the TWRA? We talking matching funds here, or it says?
There is no cost except for the fact that we are the fiduciary for the Tallahassee Fund, so the money flows through us, but requires no money from us.
All right, thank you. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Jones has moved to approve. Second from Commissioner Woods. Any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Pandy.
Thank you very much.
Assistant Director Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. As the Commission discussed and approved the new changes to our duck blind drawings and the tier system for duck blinds, I'm here today to request a budget expansion from the Commission of $1.5 million for the implementation of that new tiered system, more specifically the construction and installation of those Tier 2 blinds. This $1.5 million will cover all 42 blinds that the Commission proposed to go into the Tier 2 system. And our intention would be to sign a 2-year contract with the vendors to have those installed over the course of the next 2 years.
All right, so this is just essentially putting into effect what we've already voted to do. Is that correct?
In order to comply with the state process, in order to put bids out for these blinds to be constructed, as you see, we've got a prototype outside. But we have to have money in the budget before we can put a contract out for bid, and this expansion will allow us to move forward with that project.
All right, thank you, Chris. Do I hear a motion to approve? Kent Woods has moved to approve. Do I have a second? Second from Commissioner Granberry. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, like sign. The expansion carries. Thank you. And Chris Richardson, while you're up there, why don't you give us a legislative update?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. I'll be brief, as it seems that I'm the only thing standing between you and adjournment. But the Tennessee State Legislature is frantically working towards the conclusion of their session. They passed flow motion this week, which is a sign that we are very close to the end. And I did want to update you really on kind of 4 specific pieces of legislation that are very directly impactful to the agency. Senate Bill 119 is on its way to the governor's desk for signature. Senate Bill 119 created a lifetime license option for adopted children. Essentially, a child adopted in Tennessee under the age of 13 years old, so up to 12 years old, would be able to purchase a lifetime license at the lowest cost that we have for children under 3, provided that it is done within 3 years of the adoption, and we have the signed adoption order. This was an initiative that was brought by Senator Farrell Hale, Senator Paul Rose, and it was something that we worked very closely with them on. We do not anticipate a significant loss of revenue based on the fact that this is probably just not that many children that are going to take advantage of it. And we were successful in negotiating to limit those eligible children to those under 12, which doesn't trigger that highest cost lifetime license. So we're not providing a discount for those, but it does give those adoptive parents an opportunity to purchase a license for their children when they might have missed that opportunity because the child is already older than 3 when the adoption occurs. Senate Bill 1080 is a bill that sponsored by Senator Kerry Roberts. It is a bill that creates a TASER study. TASER is essentially, I can't remember exactly what the acronym stands for, but it is a research group that works for the legislature, and they've now been tasked with studying, comprehensively studying paddlecraft, non-motorized vessels in Tennessee, both privately owned and commercial outfitters. And this study should look at a number of things, including pressure on access areas, pressure on our river systems, pressure in our state parks, and other facilities. So it's going to be an interesting study and something that I think ultimately is very needed, because as we know, as we've seen through the pandemic, as we've seen really for years prior to that, Colonel Ryder could certainly tell you that we spend a lot of time, money, and effort working non-motorized craft. And currently there is no revenue source associated with those vessels and really no registration or license of any kind required. So this hopefully will identify some of those issues and provide the legislature with some potential solutions for how to move those programs forward. Senate Bill 1199 was a bill that the agency brought to Chairman Sutherland and Chairman Chris Todd in the House. This is the bill that we needed to change to give you all the authority to go to a 365-day license. We also removed some old archaic statutory references to certain license types and kind of cleaned our code up to remove old out-of-date prices, but ultimately the commission, once this bill is signed by the governor, will have the authority to consider changing from the current license year of March 1st to February 28th to go towards a license that could be purchased and would be valid for 365 days from the date of purchase. So that is something will be at the will of the commission when you want to take that up, if you want to take that up. I know Jennifer Wisniewski has some experience from the state of Georgia when they made this change, and there are certainly some considerations that we need to be careful with as far as not losing any federal funding in the first year. So timing will be important for when, if the commission decides to go to a 365-day license, the timing will be important for when we implement that. And last but not least, Senate Bill 1584, still in the Finance Committee in the House, but it would be a slight expansion to our disabled license types. Currently, right now, if you are permanently confined to a wheelchair, you have the ability under our legislative code to purchase a one-time $10 permanent license, much like our disabled veterans. This bill would extend that opportunity not only to those permanently confined to a wheelchair, but also any person that has had a lower limb amputated of 75% or more. That is the bills that have come forward that are the most directly impactful to the agency. Certainly at the May meeting, I intend to have a full written report for the commission and kind of a full wrap-up of the legislative session. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? We certainly are appreciative of everything the legislature does to help us further our work, and we appreciate you giving that update. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Well, let's see, I guess we're at the end of the agenda. I just want to say a few things about Cedars of Lebanon State Park. For those of you out there who have not visited this state park, you're missing out. Our partner, Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, manages our park systems throughout the state. We don't have any responsibility as an agency in that, although we do whatever we can to help. And we have some good ideas about going forward in a partnership with TDEC. But we really have some wonderful places for people to vacation at these state parks, and I hope everyone will take that opportunity to do so. I want to thank the director and his assistants for jobs well done. Danette and Mary, thank you very much as always. I haven't seen Betsy, but tell her that I appreciate everything she does to keep us straight. All of the chiefs are doing a fantastic job. We appreciate it very, very much. Don King, Information Education Division, you guys always do these road shows as first class. The sound quality, I'm seriously thinking about becoming a singer because of the way my voice sounds right now. No, it's great, and we appreciate it all very much. So with that said, let's go turkey hunting. We're adjourned.